It's dream imagery or just kind of flights of imagination. And, eventually it makes itself clear.
Hello, bonjour, shalom, and welcome to Culturally Jewish. I'm David Sklar.
And I'm Ilana Zackon.
Join us as we explore Jewish art, culture, and identity in Canada. On this week's episode, we chat with visual artist Arnie Lipsey on his latest exhibition, The Past is Before You, at the Museum of Jewish Montreal.
Mama always wanted me to be a doctor, but I became an artist and that really shocked her. Now I'm interviewing people in the biz, pros and newish, but all of them are artists and they're culturally Jewish.
Ilana, you got to actually see the exhibit in Montreal. Can you tell me a bit about it?
Yeah, sure. I loved it, first of all. I'd been seeing the promos for it for a while and had friends go to the opening and told me that this one was really, really worth checking out. So Arnie Lipsey used to be an animator, and that's really, really clear in the style of his paintings. They feel like animated films, but in a 2D medium, in the sense that they play with your imagination a lot. He takes real family pictures that were all black and white and then recreates them fully in color. And all the backgrounds are these scenes that have nothing to do with the picture. Like he has ones that show, the mountain, Montreal, and showing the town that the family came from, both in the same thing of like where they came from, where they went. There are ones, as he's going to explain to us, it was very striking of, his relatives in a kitchen scene and a train is coming out of the kitchen counter on fire. There's ones of, concentration camp, and there's a girl she's playing in front of it. So he really paints this jarring and darkly comic image of real memories, but then, the more imaginative, magical realism style way of understanding the feelings that he has while he looks at these pictures and where they came from. I found them really interesting.
Yeah, especially in our conversations, it's almost like there's two competing things. There's what's happening in the foreground as well as the background. And my understanding and what I sort of got what based on our conversation was that the thing that are happening in the background are either what's on the minds of the family or potentially even what could happen in the future, right? Everything surrounding us is stable for a second, but then everything could fall apart, fall to pieces in a very precarious state. So that's what I found when I was looking at the images online. That's what I took from it.
Yeah, absolutely. I highly recommend, if you're in Montreal, checking it out. I think as someone who has Montreal Jewish lineage, it really, really spoke to me. It made me want to dig through my own family ancestor pictures and try to think about where they came from. Aptly named The Past is Before You is the name of the exhibit. But before that, David, your show opened in Winnipeg.
It has.
How is it going?
So one thing we didn't bring up in our previous episode, I didn't really want to talk about it then, but I lost my co-star in the first week of rehearsal. He had an accident. He broke his foot. We had to find a very last-minute replacement. And obviously that stressed me out as an actor, right? I'm working with this guy for a week, and all of a sudden we have, 2 weeks left to rehearse and bring someone up to speed. And this is not an easy text, right? It's just a two-hander for 90 minutes. This guy needs to know a lot of dialogue. So it was kind of a stressful rehearsal process for me. Luckily, the guy is an absolute mensch, Harry Nelkin, who came on board. He is a staple of the Winnipeg Jewish and Winnipeg theater scene. He's been in Stratford. He's been at the NAC, 40 plus year history, came on board, was as cool as a cucumber, said, yep, I know I have a lot, but that's okay. We'll make it all work. The organization, Winnipeg Jewish Theater, decided to give him an aid. So he has an earpiece in his ear that if he ever struggles during the run of the show, he'll get fed a line or two. And it started with him needing a lot to, we just performed yesterday where he just needed it 1 or 2 times throughout the show. So much tremendous progress has been made on our show. And it finally has settled into a place that, I'm not worried. Oh my God, what's going to happen today? We don't know where the scene might go in case there's a flub or anything like that.
Suddenly you're rewriting the whole script. For those who are listening for the first time, David is in a production of Tuesdays with Morrie based on the Mitch Albom book. And we have a whole episode where David talks to the director of the show, so you can check that out.
Absolutely. And now I guess it's time we can head to our conversation with Arnie Lipsey. Enjoy.
was really a pleasure seeing your exhibit, The Passes Before You, at the Jewish Museum of Montreal. I had my eye on it for a while, but I was out of town. So I came in a couple of weeks ago and got to go to a special version of the event where the museum curators were there to help us understand a bit more context for the paintings. But I wanted to get you on the show so we can go even deeper and I could hear it from the source. So before we get into the specifics, tell us a bit about your family history so we can contextualize your exhibit.
Yeah, well, I am originally from Montreal, and my parents are both European. They met in 1941. They had both kind of gotten to Canada just under the wire because they were both sponsored by direct family members. And at that point, of course, that was the only way they could possibly come in. Even under those circumstances, it was difficult.
And you have a background in animation. When I saw the exhibit, what was explained to me is you took archival pictures, which were all black and white family pictures, and then you recreated them in full color. And from my observation, and you can put it into your own words, the paintings use juxtaposition. So we see these smiling family pictures often, not always smiling, but a lot of them are. And then the backgrounds are these very dark, almost magical realism scenes that represent where they came from and some of the trauma. Walk us through how you decided to depict your series in this style, and feel free to adjust the way that you define that style. And what do you hope audiences will take away from the paintings?
Right. So this series of paintings started while I was still working in animation and kind of started to, I started painting on the side. What I wanted to do was family portraits based on these archival photographs. I started reinterpreting them, reinterpreting the black and white photographs into color. I did a couple of them, and then I realized that it just wasn't saying enough about who they were and what their lives were, and I thought I might be able to introduce other elements, not just the backgrounds, but actually just other things that were symbolic to who they were. And it started out without any grand plan, but it's evolved into a process where I pick a photograph that just resonates with me. And then it takes a while to understand what it is I want to say about it. And it's almost kind of a free association process. And once I land on an image in my head about what I want to do, it may or may not be rational. It may not make immediate sense to me. But I know if it hits a certain kind of level of psychic depth, I guess, I trust the instinct and I go with it. And then it's during the process of painting itself where the painting itself starts to explain itself to me. It's dream imagery or just kind of flights of imagination. And, eventually it makes itself clear.
Now, as someone who has not gone to the museum and seen it, I've only looked online to see some of your paintings. In several of your works, you focus on family gatherings. But what I noticed in the background, there's sort of this always menacing threat, be it a tornado, a wildfire, or in one of your paintings titled Cottage 18, a guard tower. How that sort of landed on me was sort of saying, yes, the times are good now, but there's always something in the background lurking, ready, present, to throw everything into chaos. And that landed on me as being very, very Jewish. Was that your intention in any of these works?
Oh, pretty much. And, it depends on what generation you're talking about. Either there's a memory lurking back there, or when dealing with people who are my peers who grew up innocent of all those experiences in their own lives, we grew up kind of in blissful ignorance, not ignorance exactly. I mean, we knew the history, but I guess we didn't realize how good we had it.
Yeah,
growing up, and there's always just there's the subtext of our own family history, and then this stuff can happen.
Yeah. You also infuse a lot of humor into some of your works. Two that stood out to me from the exhibit. I don't remember the name of this one, but you turned your relatives into saints.
Yes. Yes.
And then you also have the one with them posing with Santa Claus, which I believe is called Incognito.
Right.
Can you talk about how you use humor as a way to process difficult experiences in your work?
Well, it's the way I process life.
Okay.
My sense of humor is pretty dark. The one called Saints of Brantford is of my uncle and aunt. He was, in any case, my dad's older brother, and he was the first in the family to manage immigration 10 years before my dad showed up. They were the key for the immigration of the entire family that happened afterwards. I mean, he sponsored my father and his sister and her betrothed, and that's why we're here. And they consequently, even with their human failings, they were kind of venerated by the rest of the family. And so the original photograph was of them kind of in the 1970s standing in a parking lot or something. But
oh, wow.
I put them in against a vintage image of Bradford, Ontario. That was their first permanent home. And I kind of framed it like a Russian Orthodox icon and set it against, I mean, he was very, very devoted to the Jewish religion, even though he wasn't strictly speaking Orthodox. But that was really what consumed him, were Jewish issues and theological issues. So I just thought it would be ironic to turn them into Russian Orthodox saints.
People,
halos behind them.
People seemed very drawn in by that particular painting. There were a lot of comments about it in a good way. People thought it was funny. Having worked in animation for so many years, what are the challenges and also the benefits of telling stories through a static medium such as painting?
I studied at the Montreal Museum of Fine Arts School of Art and Design and studied animation as a major, but also took up painting, printmaking, and had a fairly well-rounded visual arts education.
You also went to Israel to study in sort of the burgeoning kind of animation industry in the mid-70s?
I actually went there to help a member of a kibbutz to establish an animation studio there. This was after school.
That's so cool.
But just to answer your initial question, the difference between painting and animation is painting, even though one canvas can take me a month and a half to do, compared to animation, it's instant gratification. Animation takes so long, and the payoff is relatively tiny. So I'm, to me, this is all great.
In terms of putting a big theme into one image, you described, the idea of turning your relatives into saints, for example.
Right.
It feels to me, as someone, I mean, I have done some painting, but not in any professional capacity, that maybe there's a pressure of, I need to make sure that I get in as much as I can into this one image, as opposed to a film. Even if it was a 5-minute short animated film, you have time to develop it. How has that experience been for you, moving into a career that is focused mostly on painting now, to do that?
Right. Well, the process, it either kind of like hits me like a thunderbolt, or I have to really, I've just learned to really be patient with myself. Sometimes it just takes it could take weeks of just kind of like, staring at a picture, and I know I want to do something with it, and I'm just waiting for that spark to come in. With many of the earlier pictures, it was pretty quick. I've just learned how to trust that it will develop.
And family is such an important part of most of your pieces. And as I said earlier, there's terror and there's tragedy all around, but it's family that seems to hold everything together. Right. I know you said your family used to fight a lot, and I'm curious, maybe what does family give you, or what does family mean to you today?
What does it mean to anybody? I mean, it's the foundation of who you are. I think Art Spiegelman, who I'm a big fan of, I think he was explaining why he kept on relating his father's story in Mouse, and he said, the throwaway line was, "It's cheaper than therapy," and I kind of feel the same way. I'm working out issues. It's not necessarily a rational process, but it's as I've said before, it's the paintings themselves that they explain themselves to me. as I'm doing it. And even after the fact, I can stare at something and then realize, oh, that's what I meant.
I wonder if that's why they really spoke to me. I find all the images at the museum, and I know you're working on more, very, very compelling. My process as an artist, I'm more in the performing arts side, but I do a lot of intuitive writing, and it's a similar kind of process of letting it come without forcing it. And I hearing you talk about it makes it make sense why something about the style of the images really, really resonated with me. Going back to talking about family, I hear that a lot of your family members came in to see the exhibit when it opened. Are any of the people in the pictures still with us?
The people in the younger generation are, sure.
And how did they react to seeing themselves depicted?
It's really great because their reactions have been universally positive and supportive.
And I'm curious, you reached out to the Jewish Museum of Montreal directly as a home for your series, although you do currently live in Toronto. So what inspired you to showcase your work there and establish a relationship with them?
Well, I thought it was natural, given that, so much of my childhood was in Montreal and the connection is very strong there. I wasn't familiar with the place at all. They're a relatively young institution. They weren't always even in brick and mortar kind of existence. A sister of a friend of mine who was in Montreal said, "Hey, I've seen your stuff, and these people would really, I think, relate to it. Why don't you get in touch with them about it?" That's basically what I did. They reacted by saying, "Well, let's see if we can find a spot on the schedule," which they did.
It sounds like you had the right instinct, because I've been hearing it's been their most popular exhibit. A lot of people have been coming.
You're still working on more paintings in this style. What is your long-term goal for the project then?
I would like to take the show, or a version of this show, to other institutions, possibly in Toronto, possibly in the States. I'm not sure it's really meant necessarily for a commercial gallery, but that may happen too.
And how many paintings do you have now? I know it was only a selection of them at the museum. How many do you have in total at the moment?
At this point, there's over 30.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah. And remind us, when is the exhibit on till at the museum? You said it just got extended.
Informally, and I'm not sure it's official yet, but it looks like December 20th. It was initially open until, I know it's for sure it's up until October 27th. December 20th is the unofficial extension.
So if anyone is in and around Montreal until the almost end of this year, go check it out at the Jewish Museum of Montreal. Arnie, I want to thank you so much for coming on to chat with us today, and I wish you all the best and all the great success in the future.
Thank you very, very much for having me.
Ilana, do you want to tell us what's happening in the Canadian Jewish art scene right now?
Sure. So there's two events happening in Toronto on September 25th. One of them is an LGBTQ plus at the J event called Soul Candles. It's a candle making workshop that explores participatory ritual, tradition, and ancestral connection. That's happening at LGBTQ plus at the J in downtown Toronto.
Do you actually make candles there with them?
You get to make candles, yes. So it's focused on the old Ashkenazi custom of making soul candles out of beeswax. It's a really old practice that was carried out by women in Eastern Europe who would measure the graves of their ancestors with wick thread and then make candles as a way to connect to those who are not with us. I've never heard of that before. So if this intrigues you, you can check that out. David, what's going on your end?
Okay, on October 6th at the Prosserman JCC in Toronto, they are having a concert, an Israel Chai concert. They invite everyone to join in remembrance and hope as we all mark the first year to the October 7th war. The Rockies Band will perform covers of Israeli songs that have become the soundtrack for this past year, interwoven with stories of loss and heroism.
Amazing. Also in Toronto and Israeli, we have Seven Blessings. It's a film showcase. It was Israel's submission to the Oscars. And the film unfolds over a riotous week of Sheva Brachot, 7 nights where two newlyweds are honored with festive dinners. What is meant to be a week of unbridled celebration becomes a catalyst for family conflict. And it's about Moroccan Jews and French Ashkenazi Jews. That is
my
where the
favorite type.
conflict arises. So that's playing at the Prosserman GCC as well, September 25th in Midtown Toronto at the Leia Possum Theatre.
Okay. Also in Toronto, and another film is part of the High Holiday screening. It's titled The Good Person. It is happening on October 9th, 7 p.m. downtown Toronto at the Cineplex Cinemas Varsity and VIP. Basically, this story follows Moran, who's a film producer from Tel Aviv facing severe financial debt. She reluctantly agrees to take on a project that involves resurrecting the career of an ultra-Orthodox rabbi who used to be a legendary film figure that abandoned his secular life to fully embrace his religion. And this rabbi inspires to adapt the biblical tale of King Saul, but with an all-male film crew. That'll also feature an introduction and post-screening discussion led by Rabbi Lawrence Englander.
Very cool. Well, lots going on in Toronto. The rest of Canada, it's time to step up. But if you're in Toronto, which I'm sure a lot of you are, there's plenty to do in the next couple of weeks.
All right. So I've got a week to wrap up my show, and then I fly to Toronto for 24 hours to do a small project, and then back to Calgary before I take off on a little vacation. So lots happening, and we'll continue to update you on many different topics of arts and culture here in Canada. Take care, everybody.
Culturally Jewish is hosted by me, David Sklar, and
Ilana Zackon.
We're produced and edited by Michael Fraiman, and our theme music is by Sarah Siegel-Lazar. We're a member of the CJN Podcast Network. To support our work and everything the CJN does, visit thecjn.ca/donate to make a monthly donation and receive a charitable tax receipt.
Thanks so much for listening, and see you next time.